speaking of folks not being able to handle taking care of things themselves, well, let's jump right into our VAR match week 7 review. And to be honest, there weren't that many egregious VAR decisions from this weekend. Like, I can't even think of one that is like glaringly, obviously terrible, which I guess is like a check mark in the Premier League and the PGMOL's hat, I guess. So let's start with the first match of the weekend, Paul. Really, the only item that came up for any kind of debate was the potential penalty on Virgil van Dijk against Mark Guy on the set piece where he kind of drags him back, pulls him back a little bit in the box. I never thought it was anything. They looked at it briefly. Were you worried at any moment watching that they may find that to be an agreed foul? I mean, he does grab the jersey, and he is past the last defender. I just don't know the impact meets the criteria there. What were your thoughts when you first saw that in real time? And more importantly, what were your thoughts when you started seeing that they were actually reviewed?
Yeah, I I always feel like a little bit like my heart's in my throat anytime they slow replay down and start looking at that stuff, because I just think the threshold of them consistently calling it the same way has been so low for so long. You just really feel like it's a coin toss going in. So I agree with you. I didn't think it was a whole lot of anything, but then again, we've seen a whole lot of anything get called.
I was most worried when I actually listened and I heard David Coots on VAR, and then I was like, oh shit, this is a penalty all day long. The most shocking thing is that David Coote didn't find a way to make that a penalty. For me, the only thing that made me nervous, or at least makes me give a little pause, is I was very critical that I thought that they made a mistake by not awarding West Ham the penalty when Somerville was dragged down.
Yep.
And then the league came out and agreed that the West Ham should have been a penalty. Like the independent panel said that they felt that, one, it should have been called a penalty on the pitch and that there was enough there to review it. I guess the difference here from what I've been reading and hearing is the impact. You're going to hear a lot about impact, I think, during this segment today, because that was really like the rallying cry for why they got the calls right this weekend. I still feel like they're leaving way too much gray area in these VAR decisions, because what was supposed to be the only way we change a call on the field is if it's clear and obvious has turned into all these legal maneuvering. So if they had awarded that a penalty on the pitch, do you think there's any way VAR gets involved to overturn it?
No, because I don't see clear and obvious anything there. Like, either way you call that, like, I don't see a clear and obvious way to overturn that, because if you like, and I guess this is where you get into like the interpretation of these rules, right? Like when you're interpreting that, if you do, and you're looking at impact, well, what does that mean? Like if he's out of the play, like if that never happens, does it impact his ability to get to the ball, right? Like, I think that's what we're probably looking at. So I just think when you have something that starts interpreting those rules into it, I think it gets grayer, right? So I don't think so. I mean, but this is really what this comes down to, right? It comes down to the original interpretation of the rule, and it comes down to the application, right? And having both of those be consistent across 16 refs, like that's where it gets really, really difficult, I think. I didn't have a problem with this one because, like, when we talk about impact, I think when you looked at the Somerville incident, if that doesn't happen, he gets to that ball, right? Like, I think that's the main difference between the two of those. Like, you can't tell that, and it's very unlikely in this scenario that it impacts much of that play or his ability to have an impact on that play. And I think that's what it kind of comes down to for me.
So let's move to the 12:30 primetime game on Saturday, 5:30 UK time, 12:30 Eastern time. Everton versus Newcastle. VAR gets involved to basically award the penalty when Tarkowski just flat out rugby tackles Tonali in the box. Now, I know Tarkowski is the captain, and we love to poke fun at Everton and we poke fun at Tarkowski, but I think we both like basically always kind of commended him as like a loyal. He's a good soldier. He's a hard defender. He was good for a bad Burnley team. I think at times he's good for a bad Everton team. He's a true Premier League defender, center back. He is adamant he's done nothing wrong. And he's in the ref's ear the whole time after the penalty is awarded. Is James Tarkowski more upset that he's caught for tugging Tonali and taking him to the ground? Or do you think he's mostly upset that, like, if you're going to call the penalty, you had to see what I did. If you're going to call it a penalty, either call it on me. But, like, it felt to me like he was more upset that it was VAR that awarded that penalty and not the referee on the pitch. Because to me, I didn't feel like he had any argument or any leg to stand on whatsoever in that instance. I mean, he grabs the guy by the jersey and takes him to the ground.
I mean, all you got to do is mail the still of that video clip to him. I mean, it's pretty. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting point you made. I didn't really think about that. Like, to me, he just looks like a player who's frustrated in a bad side right now. And, like, he's played more Sean Dyche football than probably anybody should not only have to play but watch in a lifetime. So, like, I think he just looks like a captain in a central defending on a team that's conceding a lot of goals, which is exactly what Everton is. And it looks to me like he's just like cut a frustrated figure right now.
So fast forward in the match, obviously Gordon takes the penalty. Pickford makes a good save. And it's not a terrible penalty. It's a good save. It's not a good penalty, but it's not a terrible one. It's not one where I blame the keeper. I think the keeper makes a good move. I think Pickford, he's proven that he's good at penalties. He's done it for England. He guesses right. And what he does really well is make sure that he's already leaning that way and that he keeps his back foot on the line. So he's able to press out or press off the way he does and not worry about it being retaken. There was some communication in the Discord. I think it was Timuchin that mentioned thinking it was unfair on Newcastle to put Gordon in that position, to have him take that penalty. I don't know if I agree with that, only because, Isak's their number one penalty taker. Wilson's their number two penalty taker. Gordon took a really good penalty last week, and he clearly wanted that. And I think the kid has the confidence. And right now, I'd argue he's their best offensive player, even including Gamarish and Joe Linton and Isak. So, did you have an issue with Eddie Howe allowing him to take the penalty? Do you think in that spot you'd like to see someone like a Gamarish or someone walk up to him and just say, hey, I know you're on penalties, but are you sure you want this one? Because it felt to me like Gordon wanted it the moment it happened. He wanted to score that goal because he bets on himself to be a match winner. And that's what I like about the kid, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this probably just comes down. Like, I think this is one of the most difficult parts of managing, right? I think if you're a good manager, you have to know your players and, like, be emotionally intelligent about what they're capable of in those situations. And, like, Eddie Howe strikes me as the type of manager that doesn't go in and make those decisions on the pitch. Like, he strikes me as a manager who's probably had a conversation with him before that match or at any point in the week building up to it. He's no dummy. Like, he knows the story. He knows where he came up. He knows who he plays in front against, who was the keeper when he was, like, he knows all those things that are going to factor into this. So I would be absolutely shocked if there wasn't an in-depth conversation before this match with Anthony Gordon. And like you said, Anthony Gordon is the type of guy that's always going to he's always going to have his hand raised and be the first in line. Take a kick, which, I mean, if you're an England fan, you could have used more of that in a couple of Euros ago. I don't have that much of a problem with it. I think it is a tough spot, but I think big players take big spots and take shots. So,
yeah, I think he owned it after the match. He, answered all the questions. He said it wasn't good enough. He needs to do better. To me, I think you let those players do those things in those moments. I think it might have been more damning had Eddie Howe tried to talk him out of taking that penalty because he didn't believe in him, than handing him the ball and letting him miss it. So, couple other quick ones. I don't think we need to talk about the Lamina challenge on Collins because that one was more of a tackle than even Tarkowski. Other than the fact that it's Wolves, And once again, they're hard done by a VAR decision. But to me, it's just a bad decision by the match official to not give the penalty. It is almost carbon copy to what the player does to Jota the week before. When will Wolves learn, and will they be in the championship before it happens?
I don't know, but they're going to set some kind of record for goals conceded this year at some point because, man, they are leaking in the back, and it is I don't know. Yeah, the only way that they're going to win this thing is like 5-3 matches like Brentford, and unfortunately, they're just on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I said I was the one who picked Wolves to go down in my predictions, and it was kind of like my throwing shit against the wall. I also said Gary O'Neill might be the first manager fired, even though I thought it would be unfair for him. And I'm not so sure that might not happen because he might get fired even before they fire Ten Hag or Dyche. It's interesting. I keep hearing like Goldberg every morning says, "Oh, you don't have to worry about Wolves. They're too good to go down." I have not seen anything about that side that makes me think they're too good for anything at this moment. Because they don't look like a team that's very well built or very well constructed. So I'm not sure that it will be able to hold them up. I did want to ask you about Leicester and Bournemouth. There was shout for a handball against Zabarini. This was probably and I had to double check this to make sure. This might be the most shocking piece of news ball that we say on this entire pod. Do you know that VAR and match officials on the pitch have awarded 0 penalties for handball so far this year in the Premier League? None. And what jumped out at me was when I saw the statistics around the number of handballs given by VAR in all the other major leagues, and more importantly in Europe. It feels to me like the PGMOL has basically said, it is going to take a guy reaching up to catch a ball for us to award this as handball. Because in this instance, Zabarini's arm is a good 1.5 feet from his body, but he's running at full speed. So the argument is, where's his arm supposed to be running to close down a winger trying to go past him? Could there be a moment where we move the handball rule so far away from what IFAB tried to bring in a few years ago that we get to a point where it's almost comical because defenders kind of know they can get away with just about anything if it's not blatant in the box and not have it be awarded handball?
Yeah, we're pretty close already there. I mean, when you said at the beginning at the top, like there wasn't anything like egregiously wrong this week, like this is the one that kind of stood out to me. But then, as we go, it's like pretty consistently all year they haven't been calling this unless they've absolutely been in a spot where you felt like they had to. And this was as close to that spot as I've seen this year. So we've come a long way since the back of the hand handball in injury time that saved Mourinho. So yeah, it's I feel like it's been a long spiral down, but that's going to get sorted because I don't know, for me, that's a pretty obvious one.
To me, it felt like a handball. I didn't understand it. I was rooting for Bournemouth in the match. I wanted them to get something out of it. So I was looking for the game to be close. Now, here's the last one. We'll do this one really quick. Did you see the second Arsenal goal? And it's the one that Martinelli
scored. 20
scored.
minutes it took for them to figure out whether it was onside or not.
It's like 3.5 minutes, and they claim they spent most of the time looking at Martinelli. But really, the only question to me was whether Mourinho was offside. Now, he's clearly offside. And he clearly tries to head the ball, which, to me, if there's two players, neither being defended, the goalkeeper has to decide if he's going. To me, the goalkeeper is put off by Mourinho trying to head the ball. Whether he misses it, attempts it, how is that any different than what we saw from United last year or from Vardy earlier this year? To me, the only difference is the league was fine with Arsenal going up 2-1.
Listen, I completely agree. And I think the reason it took so long is because they were in their booth. They were in the booth using a phone a friend. I think there was a disagreement on how to apply this. I literally think they were buying time and trying to figure out how they wanted not in some weird like conspiracy way, but like literally how they wanted to apply this to this situation based on that movement, whether it was enough or not. And I think that's what took so long at them talking about that. And yeah, you're right. To me, it doesn't make any sense how they've, consistently applied that one way this year, and then versus for an Arsenal team, it's different. But we've seen this with City for 3 or 4 years. These calls get called differently in these races where they feel like there are title points involved.
And I'm sure people outside of the Liverpool world probably think we get calls too. Like, this is how supporters go. I think we could chart out more times than not where we're not getting calls.
I think that
like there are times that they do benefit us, by the way. Like, I do think
I also think this is kind of like, like Americans grew up watching NBA and watching like Michael Jordan get the star calls, right? Or the big stars getting the benefit of the doubt in calls in big games. And I really think that this kind of applies in the UK, across the EPL, really all the European leagues probably. But I really think that the teams that are involved at the top in the titles do get the role on these 50-50s. And I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, and I think that's that way. And I think that's human nature. And I think that just happens in sport. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I do believe that it occurs. Let's take a look at some of these.